Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out. This is part of a joint partnership between the World Affairs Council of Tacoma and Bellarmine, where we've been putting on presentations. We just got started, and then you all know what happened. And so this is our first presentation since, what, it's been a year and a half? Yeah, so we're very excited, and thank you for coming out, and thank you for all of you who are watching this at home live stream. Mina will come up in just a moment to introduce Sok-Khieng, but first I just wanted to say a little bit about the World Affairs Council. We're an organization, and our mission is to promote public understanding of world affairs and to enhance the ability of its members to engage in the global community. And it's as part of that mission that we started this relationship with Bellarmine, and particularly their Model UN Club, who have been a great group of students to work with. And so I'd like to start off by thanking the Model UN Club, and particularly we've had 3 of the members have been representatives on our programming committee board, and that's Maya Loveland Highland, Mina Nair, and Marianne Joyce. And so I'd like to thank the 3 of you, and also their advisor, the faculty advisor, Ken Brown. And I'd also like to thank Bellarmine for letting us use this lovely space and their facilities. And I would also like to make an announcement that there will also be another talk that the World Affairs Council will be hosting, this one through Zoom, on December 16th. The writer Peter Martin will be discussing his new book, China's Civilian Army, The Making of Wolf Warrior Diplomacy. And so the Zoom link and the information you can find at our website, World Affairs Council Tacoma. But now, let me turn it over to Mina, and she will introduce our speaker for the night.
Hello, my name is Mina Nair, and I'm serving as the president of Bellarmine Model UN this year. So Model UN is basically about the idea of diplomacy and working together with those with opposing mindsets, and that's what I find to be the most special part of the program. So this is why we believe that it's essential to start to bring more of a holistic approach to Model UN rather than just debating in conferences. So this is why our partnership with the World Affairs Council of Tacoma allows us to bring that through speakers with outstanding stories. So it's my honor to introduce our first in-person speaker in 2 years, Sok-Kheing Lim. Tonight, Ms. Lim will share the inspirational story of her experience as a Cambodian refugee who immigrated to the United States to become a highly successful attorney after escaping the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia. She currently specializes in immigration matters including citizenship, visas, green card insurance, asylum, and deportation litigation. Ms. Lim has also served as a former board member of the Tacoma Community House and Pierce County Sexual Assault Center, and currently serves on the board for the World Affairs Council of Tacoma. Without further ado, here is Ms. Lim.
Thank you for coming out to this presentation. So the reason why I am showing this, and for those who may not know about the movie involving Robin Williams, but he was a commentator. This is all throughout the Vietnam War. And why this kind of plays into Cambodia is that the Vietnam War and the politics behind all of that, to me, in my opinion, overshadowed the horrific genocide that had happened in Cambodia. And so I want to be able to, tonight, give a little bit of background about Cambodia, give a little bit of history about Cambodia, and to really put a spotlight on the genocide in Cambodia. You know, we look at Cambodia in 2021, it looks like quite a developed country. And it's changed over a long period of time. But in really getting the true culture of Cambodia, I want to be able to share with you the history of Cambodia and how the genocide has played such a massive role in the shaping of Cambodia and the people that have come from Cambodia or who have survived the genocide. So here's a photo of one of the ruins in Siem Reap, which is a city in Cambodia that has the Angkor Wat. You know, I've heard and read that Angkor Wat is one of the 7 wonders of the world. Until you actually are there in person seeing it, it really is an amazing, amazing place to be. And I've been blessed to actually go back in 2009 and get to see it for myself. But the enriching culture of Cambodia can be really experienced through walking the ruins out in Angkor Wat. So, you know, looking at Cambodia for, I think not a lot of people know this, but for literally 4 years, 75 to 79, there was a massive genocide that happened in that country that essentially took out, I mean, the numbers range, but anywhere between 1.5 million to 3 million people living in Cambodia. Killed, starved, however way you want to label it, but basically annihilated. Away from loved ones and never having the opportunity to fulfill whatever dreams that individual has. And so I think when the regime began this atrocity, it was hidden from the community. And when I say the community, I mean the world. Because this is a third world country that people don't really pay attention to sometimes. And these atrocities happen in third world countries probably more frequently than we want to admit or want to believe. So in order to really understand Cambodia, we have to understand how this genocide came about. So for 8 years before the genocide, Cambodia was engaged in a bloody civil war. And the war pitted Cambodian monarchy, so they had a king at that time, with folks that you know, looked at power in a different way from outside the monarchy. And so this began, in some historians' realm of looking at it, the Communist Party, right? So from 1960 to about 1970, the country was ruled by King Sihanouk, again, a monarchy that controlled a lot of the politics that had happened in Cambodia. And from that, it stemmed and really developed another group that wanted to make Cambodia not controlled by a monarchy. And so in 1970, King Sihanouk was overthrown. And at that point, there was a general called General Lon Nol, who then has labeled himself now as a prime minister. And he controlled Cambodia. And this formed what we call the Khmer Republic. Well, from that Khmer Republic, there were other folks in Cambodia that didn't have the same view as General Nol, and now was the shaping of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. So over the next 4 years, there was
the development of the Khmer Rouge, and it started to grow. By April of 1974, the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia. And when I mean took over Cambodia, by force. They had a significant military group that overthrown the government of Cambodia. And now begins the genocide in April of 1974. So this was a situation where the kingdom of Cambodia was controlled by a communist party that really did things to their people that one can't even fathom or imagine. They basically gathered all of their citizens who weren't part of the military at this time and forced them out into these rice fields. And historians believe that Pol Pot's ultimate goal is to make a society where it's a society of peasants. Because a society of peasants is a society you can control much easier than a society that has equalities. So they started purging. They purged cities, villages, and towns, and anybody that appeared to be wealthy, appeared to be educated, appeared to be religious, were killed, just killed. And those, particularly those who were part of the military of the prior regime, automatically killed. And so, sometimes these killings were arbitrary. Sometimes folks who wore glasses were killed because they either appeared to be someone with education and or somebody who was wealthy to afford glasses. This now pitted neighbors against neighbors. It pitted children against their parents. Young children were recruited to be part of the regime and forced then to kill other relatives. Brothers and sisters were against one another once the genocide began. And so by 1979, when the Vietnamese drove the Khmer Rouge out of the main cities and into the mountains, by then, again, the historians say between 1.5 to 3 million Cambodians had already been killed within that 4-year time period. So, the Cambodian genocide still plays a role in Cambodia today. And I think it should, in that we should not forget what that country went through. Cambodia has never really transitioned into what it could become. It did ratify a constitution in 1993 to become democratic, but there's still, if you were to look at the politics now, some would argue that there's still some type of dictatorship ruling in Cambodia, that we've never really gotten past how the genocide began. And a lot of the leaders that were tasked with killing hundreds of thousands of Cambodians have never been brought to justice at the International Tribunal. And frankly, Pol Pot didn't die in a prison where he should be after being judged with his crimes. He essentially had died in 1998 without ever being brought to justice. So for those that have lost and suffered through this genocide, the closure of accountability to some of these leaders that were involved and had first-hand knowledge and or was active in killing those within their own country have really never been formally convicted and charged. And so out of that genocide, when we're talking about Cambodia today, there are museums that have been established in Cambodia. Again, another reminder that the genocide had happened. And one of those museums is called the Tuol Song Museum. In 2009, I was able to go and visit one of these museums. And so the main museum is in Phnom Penh, which is the capital of Cambodia. And it was one of the main prisons throughout the genocide. And hundreds and thousands of executions took place there. It's interesting because the museum itself was started by the Vietnamese folks. And I think the intent was to display the tragedy and the horrific and catastrophic genocide that happened through that time. So these two photos are ones that I took when I was out there. And you'll see, I mean, the structure has been able to sustain time, but I chose and took these two photos because it really hit me hard. Because you'll see to the right side, there are these pillars there, and it explains it on the left screen where it says the gallows. It says the pole with cables, you'll see the cables out there attached to it, have been used for the student to conduct their exercises. The Khmer Rouge utilized this place as an interrogation room. The interrogation tied both hands of the prisoners to the back by a rope and lift the prisoners upside down. They did this until the prisoners lost consciousness. Then they dipped the prisoner's head into a jar of filthy, smelly water, which then that they would use to fertilize crops. By doing this, the victim quickly regained consciousness and the interrogation would begin. So these, what they call jars, were the original jars. They've never been moved. And hundreds of Cambodians, if not thousands of Cambodians who suffered and died were tortured. And to see this and to feel it is a very powerful experience. And when you walk through the prison, you'll see photos that are streamed, and hundreds of these photos. The Khmer Rouge enjoyed taking pictures of those that they would kill. And so they kept what historians said were prizes. So you'll see these photos strewn up throughout. And when we went back there in 2009, my parents had been back several times prior to my first time in 2009. And I was, I want to say, either 2 rooms away from where my mom was. And I hear this shriek. And I run over to my mother. And she found her nanny up on the photo there in 2009. And there will be times where a lot of Cambodians who've gone back to visit see relatives, see neighbors, see colleagues up on these boards. And it's again another reminder that this is somebody who was lost. That was a somebody that made an importance in somebody's life. And so I started to feel guilty for being at the museum because I was the one that wanted to go and see this and didn't realize that I'm re-traumatizing my parents through this. But my mom said it was actually closure to see, her nanny up there, and now she knows where she's at. And so, there's these moments that we look back and we could reflect and say, why would you want to have all these pictures of dead people, in one room? Why would you want to always be re-traumatized? But this is something that should never be hidden anymore. This happened. Millions of people died in this country. So when you also go through the museum, you'll see skulls. These are skulls of people who died throughout that genocide. And they don't have DNA testing out in Cambodia to determine which one of these remains is belonging to which family member. So again, another reflection and reminder of the genocide today, because this museum continues to be there. Now, another part of a museum that's created in Cambodia is called the Killing Fields. And this is a photo that was taken from Time magazine, and over time, when they created this museum in the Killing Field, a lot of these bones of human bones continue to stay there, and then slowly but surely, shrubs and grass had grown over some of these bones. But if you go out there, even today, you will be walking and you can see underneath your feet dental remains that are there, other bones that are there, just because a shrub or dirt is on top of it. When looking at the killing fields, what this was the Khmer Rouge taking out different groups out into this field called the killing field, and essentially murdering a whole host of people at one time. But the interesting thing about the killing field is that the way that they killed these individuals. If we were to look at the remains of everyone who was killed at the killing field, you'll never see one bullet found in there. And why is that? It's because bullets were expensive. And so when they killed people in the killing field, they killed them with knives by slitting their throat. They killed them with using other hard objects. But you'll never find one bullet out in the killing field. So, as I was explaining earlier, the killing field now, you don't see all these bones there, but they're there still. And a lot of shrubs have grown over it. However, these what I call ditches continue to be present. I also encourage everybody to. These are some of the different sites and articles to learn more about specifically the Tu Long Museum, the Killing Field, Pol Pot, and the genocide that happened in Cambodia. But I wanted to tell you the history of Cambodia to then be able to get into me and the book. I am from Cambodia. I am first generation immigrant from Cambodia. I came here when I was 3 years old. I don't have the type of memories that my parents have. I don't have the type of memories that my two oldest siblings have, because they were 11 and 9 when we came here. And frankly, I'm glad I don't have those memories, because I can't have imagined the trauma that they have lived over their life and continue to live, but yet try to live a normal life for the people that are around them. So we came in 1978. In 1978, 79, the mass killings, were continuing, and I think the world started to see it and hear about it and know about it. So the United Nations, I think it's called United Nations High Commission of Refugees, really spearheaded these refugee camps. And they got commitment verbally through the media from world leaders like the United States, Australia, France, to commit to taking refugees back to their countries and helping them acclimate to their society, because the horrific genocide that had displaced them. And my family was one of them. And so, the journey to the United States as a little kid is confusing. But as an adult, it's real. And it's a permanent fixture. So at the time, one of the main refugee camp was at the border between Thailand and Cambodia. It was called, I think, the Iron Prothet district. And so these were essentially what I call makeshift tents that the United Nations with the Red Cross created to house some of the refugees. So my mom's oldest sister made it to this refugee camp, and she was the first of the family to make it. And so that then spurred my family, my parents, to make that journey as well. And so in order to get to that camp, we had to get on boats. We lived in a town at that time called Cam Pot. And Cam Pot is near Vietnam, and it is essentially a waterfront city. So there are thousands and thousands of Cambodians trying to flee all at the same time, because we just weren't sure when the next killing was going to happen. And so these boats that you'll see were overrun with people. And, I think the challenge at that time was to find whatever means you can, however you can find it to get out and to try to reach it to these refugee camps. So there's this terminology that we hear talking about fresh off the boat. It's also another terminology is the boat people. In order to get to these refugees, you got to get there by the boat. So that's where, in my book, I start off talking about the boat travel that my family and I had to endure, but I talk about it from another person's perspective. Because again, I'm only 3 years old and I don't have much memory of this. But I thought it was important to, talk about just the journey over from that boat. And I did not, growing up, share that story with many people. But at my wedding, my father, on August 4th, 2012, during a toast, brought up the boat story to everybody who came to the wedding. But the story that wasn't told was the story that there were not just one boat that involved my family, there were two boats. When my parents made the decision to leave our village at that time, we all couldn't get onto one boat. So my mom's family, primarily her parents, and most of her siblings were on one boat. And my family and my mom's two brothers and some cousins were on a different boat. And my mother was going to go onto the boat with her parents, but her youngest sister refused to leave the village. So my mom went back and told my parents, "Go, we'll meet up with you." And so my mother tried to convince her youngest sister to leave Cambodia, but the love bug hit her, and the guy she was with refused to leave Cambodia. So my mother could convince her youngest sister to go. Then we got onto the separate boat. My grandparents' boat never made it. And I think, you know, it's affected my mother, because she was the one who told her parents to go onto that other boat, because she wanted them to get the chance to make it to the camp. So, you know, till this day, I don't think my parents have ever gotten true answers of what happened to my grandparents' boat. And looking at my kids now, I've got 2 kids. They are 6 and 8, and they have amazing relationships with their grandparents. And I very much envy that, because I never got to experience grandparents. Obviously, my mom's parents died, and my father's family and his parents also died, so I never had grandparents growing up. So for those of you who have grandparents, you are spoiled like no other, and you should cherish that. So to get to various countries, once you get to the refugee camp, my parents had indicated that there were different jars. And so there's a jar for the United States, there was a jar for Australia, a jar for France, so different locations, and refugees will put their names into these different jars. And it's depending on how you get picked in terms of where you go. But no matter what, once you leave the refugee camp, most of the time it is by an airplane. So most refugees, when they get transported out to another country, it is by plane. So that was the next journey for my family, is getting onto a plane. My mom's oldest sister, who was at that refugee camp, her family got picked to go to Australia. So my mother's very sad when our family was picked to come to the United States, because she wasn't going to be with her sister. And you know, at that time, being a third world country, I don't think you really have the perspective or the information that one country may be a better place to live at than another. So I think the sadness of not being with a close sibling like this did not make the excitement of coming to the United States what it would have been, knowing now, between the countries that decided to take refugees, we really hit the lottery by being selected to come to the United States versus other relatives that went to other countries. Because I don't believe that they have been enriched like my family has, and been embraced like my family has by the United States in their countries that they have immigrated to. So, as I was saying, most of these refugees, they are transported by airplane. And at that time, I believe it was the Travis Air Force Base for refugees from Cambodia to initially deplane off of, which is in San Francisco, California. And then from there, most Southeast Asian refugees have to be sponsored by a U.S. sponsor. It's true, it's still true today. In other words, you need to be sponsored by a U.S. relative or U.S. employer or through some type of an investment into the U.S., like investing into a business or a company in the U.S. And so you would wait before you can come to the United States by first having a sponsor. So if you didn't have relatives here, which a lot of Cambodian refugees didn't, then it's by sponsorship. And at that time, the floodgates had opened up in terms of the sponsorship. Lots of churches became sponsors, lots of community organizers became sponsors, and so my family was sponsored by a Baptist church out in Westland, Oregon. And you know, I was reading this fact here that from 1975 to 1979, it was the churches and these other sponsorships that helped over 220,000 Cambodian refugees find new homes in the United States, which, if we were to talk about the refugee statistics in 2021, I can say that there is no way the United States would allow 220,000 refugees into this country with the politics the way they are right now, and it's unfortunate. So when my family immigrated here, we made headlines through our local news. And so the local newspaper came out and took photos. There was an interpreter there that helped interpret during the interview for it. And the newspaper had informed the community that this Cambodian family had 2 boys and 3 girls, when in fact we have 4 girls and 1 boy. So you can see the little chubby girl there with no shirt on, kind of looks like a boy, right? I think it was at the end of the interview, my parents said that when somebody's diaper had to get changed, they realized that the body part that they thought was a boy was not a boy, and it was in fact a girl. And there I am again, shirtless. So looking at these photos, I can understand why they thought there was 2 boys and 3 girls, a part of the Cambodian family that was sponsored by the church. So why am I showing you newspaper clippings from the community? Because it's a community effort, meaning that when refugees come to the United States, in order to really help them acclimate, in order to get them to be successful here in this country, the burden shouldn't be on just the U.S. sponsor. It's the community that plays a role in how these refugees develop and succeed or not succeed. And so I share this with you because when we were brought out to Westland, Oregon, the community that we lived in really, really supported my family. They played a role in my family's life. And the local newspaper, local leaders, Rotary Club members, they all knew about us, and they wanted to participate in helping us adjust to life in America. And that's important because it helped me become me. So, you know, part 2 of my book talks about becoming me and what that means and the different stories throughout it. But as you read it, I mean, you'll see that I am your typical all-American high school, college, law school gal, and you know, for I think a long time, I never really embraced the culture that my heritage brings, because I was again treated just like everyone else in my community, an all-American girl. You know, I mean, there were times that I did have some racial issues, but for the most part, the color of my skin, the culture I come from, the accent that my family had, didn't really matter. We were treated just like everybody else. And I think that's how it should be. And we shouldn't see someone's color of their skin, someone's accent, someone's food as being different, and different where it's a bad different. It helps shapes, you know, who we are. So that's where, in this article, it was my high school graduation, and the Rotary Club has a scholarship, and I applied for that scholarship for college, and I was awarded that scholarship. It was a $5,000 scholarship, And it may not mean much, these days with books and room board, but $5,000 was a lot for a refugee kid. And it really helped receiving that. But just knowing that my community was out there supporting, high school kids, and that I was able to apply for that, despite the fact that I'm a refugee, and actually was awarded it, says something about that community. It helped fund my education. So this is why I go back to how important it is to get involved with refugees and helping them acclimate. But part of becoming me, not a lot of folks know that I'm a first-generation refugee. And so, I think it's important to look back at where it all began. When I went out to Cambodia in 2009, we did go back and visit the village that I was born and where my parents raised their family. And you'll see there, these are rice fields. My mother was working in the rice fields. It was also near water, so my father was a fisherman. And so the fields still look like they do in these photos right now. And this is my aunt's house, my mom's youngest sister who didn't want to leave. My mother continues to harbor a lot of guilt, and so she financially provides for her younger sister, good or bad, whatever way we want to judge that. But my aunt is considered a wealthy woman out in the village. And the reason why she's considered a wealthy woman is because the structure of her home, which you'll see here is part metal and part wood. But if we were to look at what we would perceive as a wealthy home, this would not be considered a wealthy home in the United States. But in Cambodia, in a third world country, in 2009, and it continues to remain here today like this, it's wealth. And so I wanted to share this with you because, for me, it's a reminder that we are very blessed with the houses that we have here and the materialistic things that we have here. So in this photo, you'll see this is my aunt's kitchen, right? They basically cook on the floor and prepare things on the floor. This is a cemented floor, which again is a wealthy house to have a cemented floor. And then this is where they dine. We threw a party for the neighbors, and these are my second, third, fourth cousins that live out in Cambodia. I think that not a lot of people, again, would associate me with a refugee family like the one I'm showing you. But this is my family. This is where I'm from, and these are the people that make up part of my life. So it was a very humbling experience to go back to Cambodia and see this. And I wanted to share that with you tonight. But the last part of my book, which is part 3, it's being me being me. It highlights my journey to being where I'm at now, which is I'm married with 2 kids. You see my husband and my son and my daughter. My husband's Tyler. My daughter's Whitney, and my son is Wyatt. And I'm so incredibly blessed to get the education that I did and to become an attorney and working at an amazing law firm of Rush, Hannula, Harkin, and Kyler. I'm focusing more on personal injury, but I also, for a long period of time, did a lot of immigration work, which was very rewarding and gratifying for me, particularly as an immigrant myself. So, I continue to grow, and I think I will always learn new experiences and be different probably 5-10 years from now to what I am today. But that's a good thing. And so, you know, part of this book is to talk about how I got to where I'm at and what it's like to be me at this stage. But ultimately, the real reason why I wrote the book is for the future and the future of my kids. I want them to know about me and how I got here and the history that I have. But I think it's important that all our kids are who we should be telling stories to, because they're just not my kids. They're your kids too. It's a community. And so what I want you to take away from tonight is that the word refugee isn't a negative thing. It's actually a very amazing blessing to know a refugee, to understand a refugee, and frankly to live the life of a refugee. I'm better for who I am because of my refugee background. I didn't know it back then as a kid. I'm understanding it now, and I continue to understand it now. So thank you for the opportunity for me to share, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, Brian? That little girl was me. I didn't want to go into details about the book, as part of me wants you to buy the book and read it. But the story that was told at my wedding in 2012 was when we were on this boat. We were out in the water for, I think at this point, either 2 or 3 days. Keep in mind, starvation is taking place, and it's just overcrowded. And the reason why it was taking so long is because the boat was so heavy with so many people. So I think it was late at night, something happened and I fell off the boat. And other boat members kept telling my parents to just leave me, don't stop for me, and just to leave me. And it's one less person on the boat and one less weight on the boat. And my dad didn't. He jumped in and he pulled me out of the water. I was unconscious for a bit, and by this point we were just reaching the shore. And so the excitement that we had made land and the refugee camp was just, in eye distance. The chaos to get off the boat had taken place. And so my parents, I think at that time, took me to one of the Red Cross tents there. And the reason why they know it's a Red Cross tent is because of an actual Red Cross on the tent, and to try to get me some help. And so I think through interpretation or lack of interpretation, essentially what they were told was that this child of theirs could potentially have neurodevelopmental issues. Basically that I would become some kid that couldn't fully function in society. And so there's a stigma that comes with that, right? For lack of a better word, I was probably considered and viewed at my parents' eyes as a kid that was going to be the stupid kid, right? The kid that's going to have disabilities. And I don't blame them for viewing me that way, because this is what they were told by medical doctors that were in the tent. So I think the point and the reason why my father wanted to tell that story at my wedding was to highlight how I've break through all these barriers, all these stereotypes, to now be a woman who has found love, who has a career, who is a respected attorney, who has a degree, not only just undergrad degree, but a law school degree, you know? That isn't somebody who's mentally disabled and can't really, you know, adjust to society or find her way to be able to be independent. So he wanted to highlight that and recognize, you know, the accomplishments that I made despite their perception of what they believed I was going to be because of that moment at the refugee camp. So, like I said, you'll read more about it in the book, and because it starts off with that story coming over to the refugee camp. Any other questions? Oh, sure. I'll talk into the mic. No more questions? Don't feel like you have to ask questions. We've been going at this for almost an hour.
So you had some really sweet things to say about West Lynn and growing up there, and now you're living in Tacoma. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about what we could do in Tacoma to be that sort of place for refugees that West Lynn was for you growing up.
That is a really great question. So, you know, in West Lynn, when there was community events like a West Lynn Fair, everybody showed up for that. Friday night football at the main high school, everybody came out for that. And there was this sense of when there were certain activities, and activities that was important to either an organization, you know, a religious group, people showed up for it. Whether or not they're Christian, you know, Muslim, Buddhist, they showed out for it and participated in it. So I think that's important that, you know, in Tacoma, it's a much larger city than West Lynn, Oregon, but when there are local events that highlight and support other community members, if you can make it, come out, support it. But specifically when it comes to refugees, you know, I think for about 4 or 5 years, around Thanksgiving time and Christmas time, there would always be this truck with these big boxes of canned goods and top ramen, macaroni and cheese in the boxes that they would bring to our house. And the community had done a food drive to help these refugee families. One of them was my family. And it was amazing. So if there's an opportunity to do things, particularly for refugees, whether it be food drives, toy drives, clothes drive, or learning a new skill. You know, I can't say enough about the community members that actually helped my parents learn English as a second language. You know, they would, after work, make an effort to come out to the house and help my parents speak English, help them read, help them write. They didn't have to do that, but they did it, and they engaged in the family. So in other words, they weren't just there to teach my parents English. They actually got involved with us. They played games with us as little kids. And so that's meaningful. Taking the time out of your day, even though it's a long day, to help a refugee family play Scrabble or play Yahtzee, and teaching them, you know, just a simple thing as go fish. It'll resonate and it's meaningful. And so I think in that way, these are little things we can all do. You just gotta find the time to find out where the refugees are. I know that there are a good chunk of Afghan refugees that have been transported to Pierce County. Several churches have reached out to me to ask me for help with the immigration process of it. There's also the Refugee Resettlement that was initially spearheaded by the United Nations, but now it's taken over by different groups. But there is a local Refugee Resettlement office here in Pierce County that you can contact, and you can find out where some of these other refugee families have been assigned to, and make an effort to reach out to the sponsor saying, is there anything I can do to help? I mean, a simple thing as, coming up with some pajamas that are brand new that you just buy and give to refugee families can make a big difference in their life.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question more along your career choice, and I greatly, greatly admire that of you. So I was wondering, has law always been something that you wanted to pursue from when you were young, or were there any other career choices that you were thinking of pursuing?
No, law was not what I wanted to do. I believe that one of the community members had donated tickets to SeaWorld and airplane tickets to fly my family down to California. So my first experience with amusement park and that kind of stuff was at SeaWorld. Well, at that time at SeaWorld, they had Shamu, which was the orcas whale. And I saw people actually swimming with Shamu and being able to ride on Shamu's back. So my whole thing was I was going to be one of the trainers that was going to train Shamu. I later found out that was considered a marine biologist, and I did not do well in biology. So that then transversed me out of being a marine biologist to then the law. So no, it was not one of my first choices in life. But I would recommend it. I love the law. I have a passion for it, and so I'm always promoting, particularly young students like yourselves here tonight. If there's ever a potential spark of looking into the legal field and maybe going to law school one day, I encourage you to do that. I do.
You talk a lot about you had from what you've said, it sounds like you had a pretty stressful life growing up, and that you work with a lot of kind of dark cases in your field of work. And I'm just kind of wondering what motivates you or drives you to keep getting up every morning to keep fighting that fight.
Yeah, I had a high school student shadow me, I want to say about 4 or 5 years ago, and she followed me from 8 a.m. all the way through 5, and we had a few court hearings. So it was a good day that she actually shadowed me, because she really got to see what an attorney day involved. And at the end of the day, when we were talking about, her perspective of the law and whether or not this influenced her anyways, she said to me, Sok-Khieng, it seems as if you take on, lawyers take on other people's stresses. And I was reflecting for a moment, and I was thinking, yeah, we really do. And then she said, why would anyone ever want to do that? And she's right. I mean, that is a crazy thing to think that we are taking on everybody's stresses, right? That's what we're paid to do. But what motivates me is that my clients trust me, and they, believe in me, and they have blessed me with their case and finding a way to tell their story. Because that's part of my job. When we take cases to trial, we're telling our client's story. We're humanizing their struggles after an incident that somebody else was negligent for. And so giving that opportunity to do that, that's what drives me, because not a lot of people are blessed like I am to have clients trust me with that really important role to tell their story. So I know that if I didn't do it right, the case could fail. They could continue to suffer, and that's just not right. And so I don't want to let them down, because I know that if this was me, I'd want somebody to always put my case, my situation at the forefront. just as if it was another family member, my parents, my siblings. So that's how I strive to manage my clients' cases, as if they were a blood relative of mine. And I think that once you start to look at your profession and see that, are you making a difference or not, the difference that you make is the motivating factor of why you continue to wake up every morning and do what you do, because that's what it is for me. So, yes, all the way back there.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, because marine biology to law is quite a big jump, and I've had a lot of people tell me that about my career choices, but I've been thinking about, and for a while now, I've been thinking about possibly becoming an immigration lawyer. I was just wondering, like, what made you decide to go to law from marine biology, you know, to law? Like, what inspired that?
Yeah, you know, I enjoy debating, oral debates. I enjoy the interaction or the opportunity to try to make a pitch for something that probably most of the time shouldn't be pitched. And so that is somewhat the motivating factor of law school, because I knew at this time I was not going to go down the medical path and get into the field of medicine. Anybody who knows me well, I do not do well with numbers, and so the whole engineering thing was not going to work out for me. So law was really a career that stuck out. But I met with some of the students earlier tonight, and I was explaining to them that when I started out right after law school, I didn't know what area of law I wanted to get into, and so I started doing transactional corporate work. And a lot of that corporate work is reviewing just thousands of pages of documents, and it was not meaningful to me. So I realized I did not want to be a transactional attorney, just reviewed contracts or drafted contracts. So I knew that I wanted to do litigation, which is where you go to court, or there's depositions, you're engaging with an opposing attorney, so being this advocate in playing that role. So I started doing a lot of insurance defense, representing insurance companies, and that did not give me any gratification. And it wasn't until 2005 that I can't remember if it was a flyer or something that came through the office, but there was a Northwest Immigrant Rights Project organization that was looking for pro bono attorneys to take on asylum cases. So keep in mind, in 2005, I had no experience with immigration law whatsoever. And the first case that NERP had assigned me was the Sudanese immigrant. And she had been in a tribe, and at a very young age, she had endured female genital mutilation. So in these tribes, to make sure that these girls are virgins, they would sew their private area. And the argument to be made was, it might be, that's torture, right? And so at that time, there were really no determination that particularly female young women that come from these tribes are considered a member of protected class, right? Member of a particular group. And so at immigration court, we lost. And then we appealed to the Board of Immigration. We lost that. And then we appealed it to the Ninth Circuit. At that time, the Ninth Circuit, I want to say, had roughly maybe 5 FMG cases. And so the Ninth Circuit entails, you know, the state of California, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And so it took at least probably 2 years before the Ninth Circuit made a decision. And the decision was that, yes, girls that come from these tribes are considered members of a particular group, and they are protected. And so we were granted asylum, which then gets my client that green card. And when I called her to tell her that we won, she could stay here permanently, just tears were flowing down. And it wasn't tears of any sadness, it was pure tears of joy. And that, I think, was a turning moment for me. And I realized, this is why I went to law school. This was very gratifying to me. And I made a huge difference in someone's life, right? So that then jump-started me to really delve into the immigration practice. And I took all of the legal education courses I possibly took in immigration law. I joined, there was a local immigration bar, and there's a national immigration bar. I joined both of those organizations. And then I found a mentor who'd been practicing for a number of years in immigration law to help guide me. So that, these are things that if you're passionate about, you'll find a way to then really delve into that and become an expert. I've been asked to testify in court on immigration issues now. And so it just goes to show that little to no experience can lead somebody to become an expert in the field if that's something that is meaningful to them and something that they're passionate about. So I would encourage you to do that. I know that a lot of law schools are creating immigration clinics now. So law school students can represent immigrants in immigration court for free for immigrants that can't afford a private attorney like me. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Well, just looking at the time, we could sit and listen to your awesome stories all night, but would you help me please thank Ms. Lim one more time? What a fantastic way to kick off our return, John, right, to our in-person speaker series. So, Ms. Lim, thank you again so much for your stories and for your the blessing of your time. And for all your work that you've done. So Ms. Lim will, in a few minutes, be over at a table back over there, and she'll be happy to sign copies of her book if you want to go visit her and talk with her a little bit more. I'm Ken Brown, by the way. I'm the director of Model UN here at Bellarmine. And I just really wanted to, again, show my appreciation for the World Affairs Council. John, our partnership is such a blessing to us and such a great way. A few years ago, we were looking for ways as a Model UN program to connect with the community more and to bring the community onto campus. And so I want to thank also Maya and Mariana for helping out, making this happen. I thought it was a great, like I said, a great kickoff. And I think we have something fun for you as well. So let me thank you one more time, if you could, please, folks. So thanks again for coming. We're going to have more speakers this year, and so next time we'd love to see you and bring a friend, and we hope to continue to grow our program. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a fantastic night. Thank you.